Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. Tell me a little bit about your practice.
My practice is devoted to criminal and traffic defense with a heavy emphasis on DUI defense. Probably about 85 to 90% of our cases involve a DUI of some sort, oftentimes associated with some other driving infraction, perhaps a reckless driving or an accident or leaving the scene of an accident or perhaps driving with a suspended license or something like that.
Would you say that this is a highly specialized area of the law, DUI defense?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the field of criminal defense itself is incredibly broad. And within that, DUI is a very specialized area. I mean, they rely largely on science and machines and these so-called field sobriety exercises. It requires a tremendous degree of education and training and experience, I think, to do a good job in that area.
What do you mean so-called field sobriety exercises?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, the officers will talk about these things as if they can help them identify people who are impaired as a result of alcohol ingestion versus those who aren't impaired. But studies show just the opposite. I mean, studies show that people who have had nothing to drink regularly fail these so-called tests, field sobriety tests.
Why is that?
Why do sober people fail them? Well, probably some combination of they're just unusual things. We don't normally walk around walking heel to toe, and we don't normally stand on one leg. They won't give you a chance to practice these things to sort of get used to what they're asking you to do. The government has spent a tremendous amount of energy and time and money trying to come up with validation studies to give some credence to these exercises, so that people can say, look, if somebody can't stand on one leg for 30 seconds, they must be impaired by alcohol. But the validation studies themselves show a tremendously high error rate, up to as much as a third. They're going to reach the wrong conclusion about a third of the time.
Well, I can tell you I have a hard time standing on one leg in a yoga class when I'm completely sober, so that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, it's not something that I've been through the training for those things on 3 separate occasions. And interestingly, we're all sober while we're in there trying to be trained on these. And you have to both perform these tests and administer the tests. And every time we go through it, we have trouble doing them. Anybody who's honest and has been through this training will tell you that completely sober people fail these things in the classroom setting. And they're not even on the side of the road. You don't have traffic whizzing by. They're not nervous. And they still have a hard time doing them.
Yeah, police officers with badges and guns standing right next to you. So, Kevin, you mentioned your training. Tell me a little bit more about your training and your experience.
Several years ago, I decided I sort of wanted to focus in the DUI defense area, really because I thought that it was an area where people don't get a fair shake. And it's an area where our courts don't require the government to actually prove that people have done what they're accused of doing. They rely largely on machines to prove one's blood alcohol content. But of course, that test is taken, an hour and a half to 2 hours after the driving. And it doesn't take much to learn that one's blood alcohol content can change significantly over a very short period of time if they're still absorbing alcohol. So there could be really no logical connection between one's blood alcohol level at the time they were driving and what the machine said it was sometime later. And of course, that's assuming the machine gets the right result. And there are lots of reasons machines won't even get the right result. So even if you could connect it to the time of driving, you might not be working with the right number anyway. In DUI cases, they rely largely on the result of this machine and the performance on these field sobriety exercises. So I think any lawyer who's going to do this stuff needs to be highly educated and trained on those 2 areas. If you don't understand the machine, how are you going to challenge the result? And if you don't understand what the officers are supposed to be doing with these field sobriety exercises, how are you going to show they did them wrong?
So if I have a DUI arrest and I've failed a field sobriety test and the officer tells me I've blown a .08, you're telling me there's still hope for me? Oh,
absolutely. In my particular practice, the highest blood alcohol content resulting in an acquittal was a .29. Wow. 3.5 times the legal content, and that was a blood test. Wow. So there's definitely hope.
That seems like that had to have been a magic trick on your part.
Well, I think thanks to my education, my training, and my extensive experience in this area, I was able to show that the police had made some mistakes. I was able to keep that blood test out and then successfully challenge the field sobriety testing.
If I have a DUI arrest and I'm thinking, look, I just want to save the legal fees, I want this to be over with, why shouldn't I just plead guilty immediately?
Well, in my experience, everybody who pleads guilty is found guilty. You know that if you plead guilty, you're going to lose. I don't think anybody should ever do that. I mean, there's always a chance here. These things are undoubtedly tough to defend. That's why so few few people do them well. I think so few lawyers are able to successfully and effectively defend DUIs because it's so difficult to do. But you should never just plead guilty. Don't give up. Put in the time, research the lawyers, find somebody who specializes in this area, and make a decision to do the best that you can for yourself. Get somebody who does this, hire them, and let them do their job.
What kinds of ramifications are there for people in Virginia who plead guilty to a DUI?
That varies significantly depending on the specific facts of the case, but there will always be a jail sentence of some sort. Sometimes that will be suspended, but sometimes there are mandatory jail sentences triggered by certain blood alcohol tests. In Virginia, once you get to a .15 result, you have to go to jail for at least 5 days. And it goes up from there depending on whether it's a second offense or if you get to a higher threshold with the number. There's always a license suspension. The minimum is a year, and it goes up from there. You may or may not be able to get a permit to allow you to drive for work or to drive your kids to and from school or the doctor, to stay in school yourself. So it will always affect your wallet. There will be a fine of some sort. It will always affect your freedom.
Increase insurance?
Absolutely, increase in insurance. Perhaps an effect on a security clearance. Perhaps employment problems with your limited ability to drive around and get yourself to and from. They really can be devastating results.
We talk about DUI, we're often thinking about alcohol, but there are also issues for people who are under the influence of drugs, legal or illegal drugs, right?
Absolutely. And the law in Virginia, as I suspect it is in most states, is it's illegal to drive while under the influence of alcohol, drugs, or any combination of the two. I recently had a case involving Ambien. And my client took an Ambien, was planning on going to sleep, and the next thing he remembers is getting arrested on the side of the road.
And that's a drug that was legally prescribed to him?
Absolutely.
And was he aware of what the consequences might be?
Absolutely not. He had no idea. And, of course, after his arrest, he stopped taking the Ambien and is no longer using that drug.
So what kind of defense were you able to provide for him?
Well, I did a significant amount of research on the effects of Ambien and compiled a nice little portfolio of how Ambien has these unexpected results with people. There are just lots and lots of cases of people with who would find dishes in their kitchen in the morning and actually set up hidden cameras and realize that they were coming down and cooking and eating in the middle of the night. People who drive and walk and all kinds of things on Ambien. And I was actually able to convince a prosecutor in that case to amend the charge to reckless driving. So he avoided a DUI conviction in that case.
So, Kevin, if I've had a DUI arrest and I'm scared and I'm embarrassed and I'm afraid that my friends and family are going to find out, maybe my employer is going to find out, all of that anxiety is coming into play. When I call your office, what kind of treatment will I receive?
Well, I hope that the answer to that is you're going to be treated very well in our office. DUI is truly an offense that cuts across all boundaries, all socioeconomic boundaries. We have represented high-level corporate officials, down to the housewife or the person who drives a school bus or a school teacher. Everybody does this. Everybody gets arrested for this sort of offense. And I hope that when you call our office, you're going to be treated with understanding and compassion and given some personal attention so that you feel really comfortable that we understand what you're going through and we're going to do everything in our power to make it better.
And what would the process be like once I call your office?
Well, you're going to talk with an intake specialist who's going to get some information about your case, try to answer any questions that you might have. And if you decide that you're going to go with us, then, of course, you'll work out the financial details. And then we're going to give you a sort of a homework assignment. We're going to give you a very lengthy questionnaire to fill out, sort of pumping you for as much information as we can, because the details are really important. When we get all that, the lawyer's going to review the case and bring you in, and then we're going to have a more in-depth discussion with you.
And if I don't want to go to trial, can you help me negotiate something with the state?
Well, that's a decision. Whether to go to trial is a decision that we make on down the road. It's much too early at the beginning. Clients are always asking me, how's this case going to turn out? And I wish I could answer that, but of course I can't. Oftentimes we won't know that until we get to court, because the most important sort of piece of that equation is the officer's version of the events. And in Virginia, they don't have to tell us that in advance of trial. So, we're constantly sort of reevaluating the strengths and weaknesses of the case, both from our perspective and from what we think the government's perspective is. And eventually, when sort of you're at court and it's time to go to trial, then we'll figure out whether or not trial is a good idea, sort of based on the risks and benefits and what you're hoping to accomplish.
And you're going to advise me every step of the way.
Of course, absolutely. That's what you're paying us for.
Okay, so bottom line, Kevin, if I have a DUI arrest and I'm looking at this video of you right now, why should I give you a call?
Well, I think, again, in terms of what you're looking for in a DUI lawyer, is somebody who does this, this is what we do. You don't want someone who's suing somebody one day, handling a divorce case the next day, dabbling in a DUI case the next day, and doing a collection suit the day after that. We don't do that. We are a criminal defense firm. That's all we do, and we have a very heavy emphasis on DUI defense. You're going to want a lawyer who has the training about the specific things within DUI defense. Virginia has just switched over to a new breath testing machine. To my knowledge, I'm one of only 3 lawyers in the entire state who have been trained on that machine. I plan to actually own one of them here in the near future. So if you're looking for somebody who focuses on DUI defense, who has been through the training on the field sobriety exercises, who has been trained on the machine that they use, if those things are important to you, as I think they should be, your choice of lawyers is going to be very slim. And I'm on the list, and I think I'm at the top of that list.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That was great.